At this point in the campaign, as you might imagine, I have given my introductory speech so many times, I can give you any version you like. I can give anything from 30 seconds to 20 minutes. So what I'll try to do, let's do it this way. Because I would like to get to a conversation as quick as we can, but I want to give you enough information about me to have that conversation. I'll shoot for a medium version, and I won't go very much into details. I'll focus more on my personal background, and then if we want to go more in details on issues, then we'd be happy to spend the time answering questions. That sound like a good plan?
Great plan.
Thanks. So I'm retired Colonel Michael Bob Starr, and I entered this race because I think DC has too many politicians and not enough leaders. I originally grew up in rural Oklahoma, a little town called Idabel. It's as far south and east as you can go in Oklahoma and stay in Oklahoma. So the big treat for us as we approached holiday season every year was the annual trip to Texarkana, because that was the closest town to the mall, and we got to go to the mall and do a little Christmas shopping. So grew up in the country. If I'd stepped out on my back porch and shot my .22 south, I probably would have hit Texas. I never did that. I never shot Texas. The point is that we were pretty close. I went to the University of Oklahoma for a little while, but then pretty quick went to the Air Force Academy. Graduated from the Air Force Academy in 1992. So I've never run for political office before. What I have done for 23 years is defend the Constitution of the United States. And that's what I'd like to keep doing as your representative in Washington, D.C. I've had 14 assignments in the Air Force. I've had 3 to Washington, D.C. So I know what that city's like. I know how hard it is to get things done, and I know how poisonous and seductive the environment is. But I also know that if you're persistent and you have leadership, that you can make good things happen for big people. I've had 4 assignments to Dyess Air Force Base outside of Abilene, so I spent almost a third of my career in West Texas, and probably wouldn't be too surprised to learn that I spent most of my career fighting terrorism, given the time in history we are. I was in the first formation of B-1s to enter Afghan airspace after 9/11. I dropped one of the first bombs on Taliban while the World Trade Center was still smoking. I've always been a march to the sound of the guns type of a guy, so I've gone back to the Middle East for a total of 1,100 days worth of deployment since 9/11. That includes time as a planner in Saudi Arabia when we were planning the air campaign against Saddam Hussein, the campaign that the media called the shock and awe campaign. So I was there in 2003 for that. I went back during the surge and worked on General Petraeus' staff in Baghdad. I was the deputy chief of his strategy division when times were not that fun in Iraq. I went back in 2012 to 2013 as the deputy commander of our largest combat air base in the Middle East. The cool thing about being the deputy commander of a big base like that, you get to fly everything that's on the ramp. So I'm a B-1 pilot, but I've got over 600 combat hours and over 50 combat missions in 5 different airplanes, but the vast majority of that is in the B-1. I've also flown the C-130, I've flown the KC-135, the tanker, and I've flown 2 different types of intelligence collecting airplanes. So really fighting terrorism has defined my career. Those 4 assignments in Abilene that I told you about started in 1997. So I spent a little over 7.5 years there, and ended on October 31st of last year, 2015, when I retired as the commander of Dyess Air Force Base. Now, a lot of people have an image in their head of what it's like to be the commander of Dyess Air Force Base, and that image is usually along the lines of being in the staff car out at the end of the runway, watching fleets of B-1s take off to go, bomb our nation's enemies. Which I've done that. That's a very fulfilling part of the job. But I wish that's all I had to do as the base commander. That some days, most days, I had 12,000 people I'd take care of. I mean, not only the people that work there, but their families, all the veterans in the surrounding area, all use Dyess. We had an annual budget of over $100 million. I ran a police force. I ran a fire station. I ran a clinic. I ran retail operations. I ran a movie theater. Nobody told me. this was not part of the course of instruction at the Air Force Academy, that one day I would have the pleasure of running a movie theater and trying to keep that thing. If it were a city unto itself, it would have been the 5th or 6th largest city in this district. So I tell people it's like running Dice Air Force Base is like running a small town with a really, really big airport. And that's a big airport in the middle, small town around it, and that's how we did that. 3 days after I took my oath of office and made an oath to the nation, I made an oath to my wife, Kim. So we've also been married for 23 years. We have 2 sons. They're grown, godly men. They're out of high school, in college now. But the older one is in Chicago, learning how to make movies. That's what he's always wanted to do. And the younger one is at Tarleton State in Stephenville, where he's studying physical therapy. So the 23 years of my service, it began with these words, and when we have a smaller crowd like this, I like to share this with you. My Air Force career began with me saying, I, Michael Bob Starr, having been appointed as Second Lieutenant in the United States Air Force, do solemnly swear to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which I'm about to enter, so help me God. I memorized that oath way before I actually took it for the very first time, and I've had many chances to reaffirm it over the years. I've also had the opportunity to administer it once I became the old guy, the senior guy, to junior officers and even non-commissioned officers who have a similar oath. That's always been more than words to me. My commitment to the Constitution was the basis of my entire service, was the basis of everything I did. I've made it the basis of my campaign, and it will be the basis of my service as your representative in D.C. When I look at that document, I think the 2 highest obligations it gives the federal government, and specifically to Congress, are to provide for the common defense and promote the general welfare. In fact, it takes those 2 phrases that we're more familiar with from the preamble and restates them in the section where it gives Congress the authority to fund the federal government. It says, Congress has, basically says Congress is responsible for funding the federal government, and then in quotes, in order to provide for the common defense and promote the general welfare. So that's where it starts for me, and that's where that's how I established what I think are the most important things we're facing as a nation and we're facing here in West Texas. So under providing for the common defense, I think it's important to secure our border. Securing the border has been an essential element of every military campaign I've been a part of, where we have focused on it and made it a priority and committed to doing it, because we know there is no freedom without security. And in these other countries where we're trying to establish freedom, we know we can't do that if we don't establish security first. I think the Obama's administration to the border has been an embarrassment. I mean, they made it a welcome mat for terrorists and criminals. And that's why it's number 1 for me. Second, I think it's important to maintain a strong military, which shouldn't surprise anyone, and an active, assertive foreign policy that more than anything else, defeats terrorism where it originates. I know what tracer fire looks like from the cockpit of a B-1. I know what it looks like when that fire bends towards your airplane, and it means they've seen you and they're trying to knock you down. I know what rocket fire sounds like on the ground, because Shiite militias threw a lot of them at us for the year that I spent in Baghdad. And I know something that apparently our president doesn't, and that is we are at war with radical Islamic extremists. And because we won't acknowledge it and we won't even act like it, we have allowed our adversaries to take the initiative in this war. We're allowing them to choose the battlefields. They chose Paris. They've made it clear that they'd like to choose future battlefields in the United States. We need to make sure future battlefields in this war in places like Raqqa, Syria, and Mosul, Iraq. We need to go after the terrorists where they are and keep them too busy to plan and conduct attacks anywhere else except in their immediate area. And I think we can do this without a large, sustained ground force. I think we've learned that doesn't always accomplish our objectives and is very costly in terms of lives and money. I think we can do this much like the early days of our fight in Afghanistan, where we had a very robust air campaign backed up by special forces and native fighters. Third, I think it's important to take better care of our veterans. I realize how self-serving that sounds now that I am one. But the truth is, nobody and certainly nobody in this race understands the sacrifices veterans and their families have made, like I do. And again, I'm embarrassed by the performance of the Veterans Administration. Clearly, that agency needs to be streamlined and reformed. What it needs more than anything else is accountability and actually hold people responsible for taking care of our heroes. But I would also like to see us shift the whole system to focusing more on local organizations that I think do a better job of actually addressing veterans' needs and find a way to empower those organizations, link them together, and take care of veterans that way. When it comes to promoting the general welfare, I think it's most important to reduce federal regulation. It does not matter what you do. You are dealing with too much red tape, and the government is in your business in ways that it ought not be. I hear that everywhere I go from everyone. And by the way, it also affects base commanders. Somebody told me once that I was responsible, as a base commander at ICE, I was responsible for following and enforcing 200,000 rules. Now, a lot of those are military-specific Air Force rules, so and even that, granted, a lot of them are the same rules that everybody labors under. It's EPA, it's OSHA, it's Bureau of Land Management. I'm in a bank, so I didn't do much with Dodd-Frank or any of the financial regulations, but it's the same idea. It's bureaucrats in Washington thinking that they know how they know our business better than we do, and trying to tell us how to do it from the Potomac. I'd sort of lump Obamacare underneath this whole issue of too much regulation. Obama's not healthcare reform, it's insurance reform, and it's really badly designed, badly executed insurance reform. I think we need real healthcare reform that, among other things, has as one of its main objectives in improving the delivery of healthcare services to our rural communities. Second, I think it's important to invest in the economic drivers of West Texas. So we're principally talking about agriculture and energy, of course. You know, agriculture is a huge economic issue. I mean, everybody knows that, but what I'd like to say, and I actually heard this from a farmer, and I think that's good. I thought it was true. Like a lot of things farmers say, if you live in West Texas, you're invested in agriculture, whether you know it or not. I mean, it's that important to the economy. And more than that, it's a cultural issue. It's what makes West Texas West Texas. And beyond that, I've always viewed it as a national security issue. There is a tremendous strategic advantage to being food and fiber secure. One that this nation has had for so long, we take it for granted. We've forgotten how important it is. We're obviously we're in a bad time right now, and when it comes to prices, the commodity prices, and we've been here before. One of the differences is when we went through a similar situation in the 80s, almost everybody in Congress, every representative understood that agriculture was a national security issue. And now that you don't hear that argument very much. And I think I'm uniquely positioned to make that argument and say that no, it is a national security issue. I spent my life in national security, so I know how important it is. And we can't wait for the Farm Bill to come up to start the fight for agriculture. I think we have to fight for it every single day. There are things we can and should be doing now, whether it's insisting on seed being listed as oil seed, repealing the death tax, reducing regulation. I've already talked about that. Actually, so here's how that fits in with agriculture. I spent a lot of time in the GINs and farm bureaus, and one of the for the GINs specifically, the most popular pastime, of course, is dominoes. But the second most popular pastime is complaining about seed companies and the prices that they charge. But the truth is, the seed companies have to raise their prices because there's so much regulation they have to comply with. And if we could just reduce the burden of regulation, then I think the prices could come down. And if we're not going to give farmers any help on the prices, we can at least give them help on the inputs so that their cost of production isn't as bad as it is. And we also need better trade deals. I mean, we're in too many trade deals where we are allowing foreign producers to have advantages while we're denying those same advantages to our domestic producers. We need to be in or out as a nation, and our trade policy needs to be consistent with our agriculture policy. If we're going to be in and we're going to support foreign producers, then we need to support domestic producers. If we're going to be out and we're not going to support domestic producers, then we need to stop supporting foreign producers. It just needs to be the same. The playing field needs to be fair. That's what our agriculture producers want. And because I believe that, on a fair playing field, we'll produce better volume, better quality, no matter what the crop is, no matter what the sector is. So we just need a fair playing field. Third, I think it's important to, third under promoting the general welfare, pursuing conservative fiscal policies like reducing federal spending, driving towards a balanced budget, and reducing the federal debt. And I think we can do this while keeping taxes low and simplifying the tax code. The IRS code has more words than the Bible. That's just wrong. Yeah. And we can simplify that, and I'd like to see it so simple that we can do it on a single sheet of paper or maybe a postcard like some others have suggested, which would allow us also to cut the IRS, if not get rid of the IRS, and start reaping those savings too. Although those are my priorities, and by the way, they haven't changed. These are the exact same 6 things I talked about when I announced for this office. So I don't change my message based on polling or based on which way the wind's blowing or what my opponents are doing. These are the things that I believe in. I also believe it's important to protect our values and our rights, like the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. My perspective on the Second Amendment is that was put there to protect us from tyrants. So my rule on any restriction or limitation that you place on the Second Amendment has to be something that we'd be comfortable putting in the hands of a tyrant. And I just haven't heard very many. Secondly, I believe strongly in protecting life. I believe life begins at conception and goes through natural death. That's based not only on my biblical values, my conservative principles. This is based on my personal experience. When my wife was 20 weeks pregnant with our first son, we were in Boston. And we went to get an ultrasound. It's a very exciting time for the young couple. Found out a few things at that ultrasound. Found out we were having a boy. Found out he would be born with a cleft lip. And he was also diagnosed with Down syndrome. So we went from the ultrasound room to meet with the doctor in the doctor's office. And at this meeting, we didn't know what to expect, but what the meeting with the doctor was to allow him to let us know about abortion, to encourage us to consider that option, and talk to us about how many risks we would be avoiding if we would make that kind of choice. And Kim and I were shocked. It was so in your face and so aggressive. We left there, we went to our church, which wasn't open for services, but was open, and we just want to spend time with each other and with our God to figure out how to respond to this, not in terms of what to do about our son, but what to do about the pressure. So it was there that we decided to call him Matthew, because Matthew means a gift from God. And if we were going to have any other conversations with the doctor, and we anticipated that we would have more, those conversations would start with us introducing our son to the doctor by name and letting them know why we had named him that. Sometimes I leave the audience hanging because I forget to finish up. So he wasn't born with Downs. He was born with a cleft lip and palate. So here's what I know for sure. 20 weeks in the womb. With the ultrasound technology that we had 20 years ago, my son had a face. And that's pretty much the bottom line for me. He had a face. And not only did he have a face, could we see it? We knew enough about it to know it wasn't like everybody else's face. He was a person. And I just don't know where you draw that line at any other place except for conception. Now, knowing that this would be an issue on the campaign and probably something that I'd want to talk about, just to show my deep personal commitment to this particular issue, I talked to Kim about telling the story publicly, and she said, well, first we have to tell Matthew. This was just a couple months ago. We'd never told Matthew. So I've already told you he's a godly conservative kid. He's in a not very conservative line of work, making movies, and he's going to school in a not very conservative town, Chicago. and he's the type of kid that sort of loves the debate. So he likes just throwing issues out to his liberal friends so that they can debate it and go back and forth a little bit. And so I told him the story about where his name came from and everything, basically the same story I just told you. And I got to the end and said, so what do you think, Matthew? He said, well, I think it's cool. And I was happy that it was a positive reaction, but I didn't understand the whole cool part of it. I said, so why do you say it's cool? He said, because that means I've been irritating liberals since before I was born. Yeah, and you obviously were late in the campaign. You've already heard a lot of talk in this race. You've heard this race and the other races that are going on. You know, talk is cheap. And you don't get to be a colonel in the Air Force or be a commander of a base by being a good talker. When you hear talk about fighting terrorism and national security, I fought terrorists. And I deployed our sons and daughters to go fight the Islamic State. You hear talk about securing the border, I have secured the border. Not ours, sadly, but other nations. Here talk about cutting federal spending, I've eliminated wasteful spending in Dyess Air Force Base. Mostly by partnering with the community to find ways that we could do things that would benefit both of us and save money for both of us. Here talk about being pro-life, and you just heard my story on that. That's a lot more than talk to me. I don't want to go to DC to make a career for myself. I've had a career, and it's one I'm pretty proud of. I want to go to DC to make a difference, and I will be a congressman that you can be proud of. So if you believe in defending the Constitution as strongly as I do, if you believe that DC has plenty of politicians and could use a few more leaders, if you believe that someone who spent 23 years defending our country knows how to keep you, your families, and our nation secure, then I'd ask for your vote, and I appreciate your support. I suspect your support is not something that you extend lightly, so if you have questions, I'd love to chat with you more and give you more of an opportunity to get to know me even better.
Well, I'd say first of all, thank you for your service.
It's my pleasure.
Absolutely.
I really enjoy it, and I would not have done anything like this except to pursue an opportunity to serve. So that's normally, and I left that out, and that's I'm sorry to cut you off.
Oh, that's right.
It may have been the question. So normally the first question I get, so why would you do something like this? Why would you leave the Air Force? The answer is I've thought about doing something like this for a long time as a way of extending my service to the nation. I've never wanted to get out and fly for the airlines or even take an executive position in a business, which a lot of senior officers have the opportunity to do. I wanted to continue to serve, but I couldn't think of a set of circumstances that would have to fall into place to make that a reality. I tell people I've thought about it in the same way I've thought about buying a sailboat and living in the Caribbean for 2 years. I can't sail, I've never sailed. But if somebody gave me a sailboat, I'd start figuring it out. And when Congressman Nagar announced that he was going to retire and not run for re-election, then I started looking at it and trying to figure it out. And ultimately led me here.
What I was going to mention was with your background in the military, I've got a son that's in the Marine Corps, and he's a first lieutenant in infantry. And it concerns me that we've got a president and past presidents that have used their executive position to send troops just anywhere at their whim. And at the beginning of the Iraq War, Congressman Ron Paul put forth a resolution to try to have Congress declare war on Iraq rather than just funding a war that was put through by the hand of the president. And I would like to see Congress take more of their constitutional responsibility in declaring wars rather than allowing presidents, whether the Republican or Democrat, to send our troops into combat at any given time. What is your position on that as far as Congress is abrogating their responsibilities?
Well, I agree with you 100%, and I do lay a lot of the fault at Congress because again it's a lack of leadership to actually do their constitutional duty and make that declaration of war. I mean, I don't know what to say other than I completely agree with you. Now, when it comes to like the Islamic State, and this is legalese, but there's no precedent for declaring a war against a non-state. I mean, we don't do that kind of stuff. And in some circles, there's a belief that if we declared war on the Islamic State, they want the world to believe they're a nation. They could use that as sort of ammunition against us to say, so the United States thinks we're a nation, so we ought to be a nation too. We haven't always called it this, but what Congress calls the authorization for use of military force does have a pretty long history. It's what we used to go against the Barbary pirates in Jefferson's administration. Again, because the pirates weren't exactly state, so we used a congressional resolution to authorize that. So when it's not a state, I think an authorization for the use of military force is fine, but when it is a state, it ought to be a declaration of war.
Yeah, I agree.
We ought to have that discussion and send our troops into a war knowing that they have the backing of the nation.
The other concern that I have, and leading into that, I'm kind of being a little bit selfish with this part of it, but in visiting with him too, the rules of engagement. It makes it real difficult on their part and dangerous, I think, too. What can Congress do as far as those? I know a lot of that comes through the Department of Defense, but do you feel like Congress can have any bearing in maybe determining a direction?
Not directly. That would be something, I wouldn't want to take that out of the executive branch because it's so focused on operating and making obviously some very, very critical decisions in a very timely way. But I mean, you can, if you have experience in that area and you know it's broke, you can use your congressional platform, if you will, to hold the president accountable and the Department of Defense accountable for those rules of engagement. I mean, I've certainly had to fight with some pretty restrictive rules, and sometimes they are. So in the heat of the fight, they never make sense, right? So they never make sense to someone who's trying to actually do what the nation's asked them to do in the heat of battle. For example, one of my tours, one of my sorties, the authority for striking a building in Afghanistan was held at the 1-star levels. I mean, so you could not strike a building unless you got a general to approve. And the reason in this case was because there had unfortunately been some civilian casualties, Afghan civilian casualties from airstrikes. There were way more casualties from the Taliban, who would then take the bodies to a building that had been bombed, and I mean, they just got there faster and were able to promote a story that the airstrikes had killed people when clearly they had been killed by bullet wounds. But whether it was true or not, the perception was strong enough that the president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, had said, look, if there are any more civilian casualties, I'm withdrawing your authority to operate in Afghanistan. That's a pretty big deal. So, and it was under those circumstances that we raised the authority to bomb a house to 1-star level. And I think that was probably for the right reasons. Still, it's hard because we're Afghan. They don't have houses like this in Afghanistan. I mean, these are mud walls, and sometimes there's a tent or a carpet or something over the top of them. Is that a house? Can you bomb it? I mean, those are like real life conversations you have from the cockpit with the infantry guy on the ground, trying to figure out if you can do something about the guy that's shooting it. Also, so if it's self-defense, if American lives are in danger, we can do whatever we want, and that has always been that's always been true.
Whoever gets elected will be and will present a set of challenges. What do you think the biggest challenges are, and how can you most effectively overcome those?
Well, I think one of the big challenges is dealing with the environment and the pressure in the DC atmosphere. Sometimes I get asked, how do we know you're not going to be like everyone else that we've sent? I mean, if we send good people there and they forget about the district, they forget about the issues that we care about, they become more responsive to lobbyists and to think tanks in DC and spend all their time in DC. I think the real answer to that question is you don't know. It's like your first combat sortie. Everybody likes to think how they'll react in their first combat sortie. The first time you see that the tracer fire, the first time you drop a bomb, you know it's going to kill people. The truth is nobody knows until you actually go there and do that. And I think that same principle is in play here. I think nobody really knows how you deal with that pressure until you actually go there and deal with the pressure. But I think you can certainly be on guard if you know it's there. So it's a lot like a combat sortie, where the first thing is know where the threat is, know what the threat is, and have a plan for dealing with that threat. So to me, the biggest threat is just the seductive nature of that power-based, self-absorbed environment. And again, I've been there 3 times, been there enough to know that it's there, and then to have a plan for dealing with it. So my plan for dealing with it is I'm not living in DC. I'll go there to do my job as a representative, but my home is in West Texas. My home will stay in West Texas, and I'll come home when I'm not doing my job. I'll spend a fortune on airline tickets, but I think it's that important to stay. And I've always been a very kind of collaborative, engaged leader. I mean, that's how I dealt with running a police force. I don't know much about running a police force, so I get experts that know about security, and I rely on them. I would like to have teams in various issues that are important to the district made up of people in the district. So like I haven't decided what to name them, but like an agriculture advisory team, and an oil and gas advisory team, and a healthcare advisory team. So a group of people that we kind of rotate around and give lots of people chances to participate, and that they will be the source for my positions.
First off, Colonel, I'd like to say I apologize for some people. These negative campaign ads that have come out the last few days on yourself and other candidates, I think are totally inappropriate. And I'm glad to see that you're running a great campaign and all, and I just want to see you keep up the good work on that. And if you want to rebut any of those, well, feel free to do that.
Okay, well, yeah, I'd be happy to. So the latest controversy or the attack ad, the basis is my participation in a fun. So I called it a fun run, and then the media jumped all over me for calling it a fun run. So I tried calling it in this latest press release. I said it's a morale run, and then they jumped all over me for calling it morale run. So I don't know what they want to call it, but we frequently had events like this on the base that were meant to build morale and just show sort of esprit de corps, and they were organized by various groups on the base. Since sometime after 2011, when the Obama administration changed the rules that allow homosexuals to serve openly and prohibited discrimination against homosexuals, there was a gay and lesbian group of airmen at Dyser Air Force Base, still do. So they hosted this particular run. It has been called in the media a gay pride event. It was never a gay pride event. It was not intended to promote or talk about gay rights. It was meant to demonstrate our pride in our service and our pride in the base. So the t-shirt said "Die as Pride." I wore a t-shirt and I participated in the runs. There are pictures of me crossing the finish line in both runs. I'm a runner, and particularly when I got into a leadership role, I finished every race by doing kind of a hero pose, just because I knew people were there taking pictures, and so there are pictures of me in this pose at the runs that were organized by the Gay and Lesbian Alliance. I believe very strongly in traditional marriage. I don't support gay rights. I've never spoken in favor of gay rights. I think that the tradition or the definition of marriage is older than the definition of law and the definition of government, and it is defined as a holy union between a man and a woman. And I object to any attempt to redefine it to be anything else. And that's my position. I participated in the runs. Obviously, I could have chosen not to. It would have been a departure from my normal standard, because I participated. We had 2 or 3 things like this a week at the base, and as the commander, I participated in as many of them as I could, because it was a way to support the base and show my support for the airmen who participated. Which in this case, it wasn't just the gay and lesbian airmen that ran. It was open to the whole base. It was kind of a representative crowd, as far as I can tell. For me not to participate, not only would have been a change. I mean, I could have been subject to a discrimination charge. I don't think it would have held up, so it wasn't anything that I worried about it, but it was out there. But more importantly, I would have been a bad leader. I mean, I would have been turning my back on the base just because of who happened to organize it. And we don't agree about lots of things, the people who serve. And there's a picture of me speaking, and there's the implication is that I'm speaking about gay rights there. I'm not. If I participate in an event, again, I was normally asked to provide some welcoming words, and I always use that as an opportunity to talk about whatever the base was focused on at the time, because you've got 5,000 people, you're trying to keep them all headed in the right direction. And what I would talk about, and I don't remember what I said at this particular event, but when it was a diversity-based event where we were talking clearly on different, clearly there were people participating that had differences, I would always say that the things that make us different, and I would do my hand like the things that make us different aren't nearly as important as the things that make us unified. And what makes us unified is our commitment to freedom, our love of our country, and our belief that air power gives us a distinct advantage as airmen. And that would be what I would talk about.
Any thoughts about the national debt and what we're going to do about it?
Yeah, so a big problem, and I think it starts with cutting spending. And so where I look to cut spending is first in these agencies that aren't adding value, that are just dragging it down with too much regulation. So I would use Congress's power of the purse to cut off the money to these organizations. Like I already mentioned, so I mean, we need some environmental protection, but not nearly. We don't need the federal government's permission to grade a bar ditch in Young County because it's federal waters all of a sudden. So I mean, that's ridiculous. So start with those, the EPA, the IRS, BL, so start cutting off that money or reducing it. And then I think we got to go after entitlements. Our whole entitlement system was designed in an era that no longer applies. And unfortunately, it's grown to the point where we're paying people who are able to work to not work. And that in and of itself is a distortion to the economy, but that's where I go after the next batch of money. And then we'll see where we are.
And I would think there would be some show, at least, of duplication of some services, maybe more than one agency is kind of doing the same thing, and some of that.
Do you think education is a federal responsibility or a state responsibility?
No, state. Yeah, definitely. So sometimes I've been asked, because I talk about defending the Constitution a lot, somebody asked me, well, what part of the Constitution is under attack? And I said, pick a part, pick a section. I mean, it's pretty much attacked across the board. But the 10th Amendment, I think, where we reserve everything that's not, enumerated in the Constitution is supposed to be left to the states. And man, have we failed to follow that. And education is a place, healthcare is another place. But education in particular, I think that states and communities are a better place to make decisions on how to educate kids. And I don't believe in federal one-size-fits-all solutions. I think I understand the theory behind Common Core, but I just think it just doesn't work in practice. It's too cumbersome.
There's a congresswoman from Utah who's recently put forth a resolution, or maybe, I don't know if it's a bill now, to more or less have Congress get rid of the omnibus type of legislation and start having every bill stand on its own. And I think so much of our waste comes whenever we have too many self-interests trying to pile every little thing that they can get into a bill. Where would you be on doing something like that? And cutting.
I absolutely support it because I would have voted against the omnibus this last one because when it's that big, everybody attaches their little piece to it, and at the very end, and it makes for bad legislation. It makes for bad policy.
Colonel, I know your background in agriculture has been limited up until this time. We've got another congressman just down the road, Conaway, Mike Conaway, who was definitely in the same boat. He didn't come from an agriculture background, but he has become the Speaker of Agriculture in the whole United States Senate, or the Congress. How do you think your working relationship would be with him? And do you feel that you can be an advocate of agriculture as strongly as he is?
Yeah, so my relationship with him has already started. I reached out to him immediately because he is a leader in not only a leader for West Texas, but a leader for agriculture. So we've had a couple of conversations, and I look forward to continuing to learn from him I want to be on the ag committee. I don't know how you can be the representative of this district and not be on the ag committee. The other one I'd like to be on, just because I think I've got something to add, is the Armed Services Committee. But, so he's the one who first told me, he said, cottonseed oil. He said, the only thing you have to, the only issue that we're really facing between now and early March, and this was before Christmas when we talked, is cottonseed oil. He said, we're going to fight with Secretary Millsack on this, and he said, I've got over 100 congressmen that support it. So he's funny because he appreciates where I am, and he and I talked about that. He said, look, when I was first elected, I didn't even have an ag client. He said, he said, you can learn, just be receptive, just go out and listen. So that's what I did. But he said, all you need to know is cottonseed oil should be an oil seed under Title I. Just say that. Just keep saying that. He said, don't worry about what any of that means. This is exactly what he told me. He said, don't worry about what any of this means. He said, if you're at the Farm Bureau at the gym and somebody asks you the next level of detail, he said, just ask them what they think. They'll talk for the next 45 minutes. He also told me, and I mentioned this at the Farm Bureau meeting at Post, because I was asked if I was a member of the Farm Bureau, and I am a member of the Farm Bureau, because Mike Conaway told me that I could be and should be a member of the Farm Bureau. I really didn't even, I had no idea that was something that was even available to non-farmers. So he told me that one morning, and by that afternoon, I was signed up and a member of the Farm Bureau.
And that's awesome. That's awesome. You're just in the wrong county.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You mentioned border security. What would be, if it were up to you, what would be the things that you would do to secure the border?
We need to eliminate the magnets. I mean, first and foremost, we can do that. That's all on this side of the border. But the sanctuary cities, everything that's drawing more illegal immigrants than would be under normal circumstances. But we also have to. It's more than a wall. Like a wall alone hadn't been an adequate way of defending territory for a long time, like since the Middle Ages. So we need to do a better job of employing technology and also get more people engaged in it, so more people in the Border Patrol.
Yeah, sure. Good, I'd like to say. Well, you mentioned too the use of the military in that avenue.
Well, so I wouldn't directly use our armed forces to do that, just because it's it's a very serious issue, but it's still a law enforcement issue. When we use the military for law enforcement, there are lots of lines there that get troubling when you think about sort of what that implies down the road. I do think that we could do, for example, what we did in Iraq, which we used military, and we call them border training teams. So we took like 3 or 4 folks with military expertise in that, and then sent them as a team to the Iraqi Border Patrol agent, whatever it was called, to train them and help them learn how to secure a border. We can do something like that here. Use them in a train and advisory role, but I wouldn't put them directly in charge of that. National Guard troops, totally different. They work for the state. They can do law enforcement when the governor tells them to, so National Guard is okay.
For the ones of y'all that don't know, I would like to introduce Don Parrish. He started in the campaign. He's from the Seminole area, Gaines County area, and decided to come up to our meeting today, and he would like to say a couple of words.
Well, first of all, several of y'all I met with when I was running, and I went to all these meetings. I spent nearly 3 months with Michael Bob and the other 7 candidates besides us, and you know, it was interesting to me that every meeting we went to that had a pretty large group of people, that when Colonel Starr walked in the room, it just instantly, you just felt his leadership. You felt his authority, and when he spoke, people were taken by him. And when I started this whole campaign, I told my wife, I said, it'll either catch fire or it won't. And so as we traveled through, there's 29 counties, clear to Graham, and that sort of thing, and Breckenridge, and as we traveled about these counties, I was the farm person. I mean, everybody sort of attributed, I am the big cotton farmer, and I'm also in the energy business, and so the oil side of things in that part of the world, those type questions were my forte, and they were my people. In fact, we attended an event in Snyder that was well attended by a big group, and you know, people even commented about, man, you really knocked it home run here. And I said, well, these are like my people, you know. I mean, they understood my lingo and the way I talked about things, and that I knew what I was talking about. But anyway, I as I watched Michael Bob mature as a candidate, and I got to, you know, some of the other candidates in the race, I got to seeing the bad side of some of them and different things. And I talked to Michael Bob about this, and he may want to expound on this after I get through, but you know, I told him right kind of from the start, I said, Michael Bob, I'm going to bring some points to the forefront, but I said, I know at this moment I'm not going to make the runoff. I mean, it's going to come down to 2 people. And I said, but I want you to know that on March 2nd, I'm in your camp. And this transpired for about 3 or 4 days, and then some other things happened, and I thought, you know, I've got a chance here to really help this guy. If I can force, you know, or not, I don't want to force anybody to vote, but if I can persuade a few people to shift to him and me kind of back off this deal. And I had watched several of the presidential candidates as they fell off the thing, you know, and there's 13 or so on the ballot, and there's only really 3 candidates left, you know. Well, our deal is nearly the same thing. There's 9 still on the ballot. I'm still on the ballot, but there's really only 3 candidates that are front runners. And I felt like, well, you know, I even went to Michael Bob and I said, you know, I think you might could win it on the first vote. If I by chance had a bigger following than I thought, and they went your way. And so anyway, I chose to do it, and I think just as you described earlier, Mike Conaway did, and I know Mike personally, and he didn't know anything about agriculture, and Michael Bob admits freely that he, you know, it's not his thing, but he's willing to learn. And obviously driving through the country, you know, and we're the largest cotton patch on earth is in District 19. And it's huge with us, and the dairy production here in Farmer County and Bailey County, and all those things that we all hold dear, and we haven't been represented correctly by Randy Nagelbauer in all this, and I've openly criticized him for the way he represented us. So anyway, and if you go to my website, it clearly shows that even if you click on the link, it takes you to his website. And I mean, I'm fully on board, and I've been with him at several different things, and in fact, the other morning I had to go to Abilene anyway, and we were at an Abilene meeting together with Rolling Plains cotton growers, and they had everybody in that room write a letter to Secretary Vilsack, a handwritten letter, and sign it. I mean, I wrote my letter, and everybody in that room signed it about getting us a little help with this oilseed thing, as he described a while ago. So I mean, you know, we're involved, but I'm 100% backing him, and I know him pretty well now, and like I said, we've spent quite a little bit of time together, and that's kind of, I'm going to spend kind of the day with him today, all in this area, because as he'll tell you, he'll say, Don, those are your people. So I'll give it back to him. I don't want to take away from anything that he's got going.
I really appreciate you, Don. You know, I told you this personally, but and I admired him as a person, admired his campaign, admired his heart for the rural counties, and he spoke so well about it. And you know, I've just really enjoyed getting to know the farmers and drive around and learning the lingo. So I learned a new one last week, meeting on the turn row.
Yes, sir.
Somebody threw that at me in the middle of the conversation. I said, oh, go back. You said something there. You can tell me what that means. So one thing I like is that there's not, let me talk first about the similarities I found. So more than I thought. Pilots and farmers really care about the weather a lot. So, so that was a connection that came pretty early. The other one is that being in the Air Force wasn't something that happened when I showed up at work at whatever time in the morning, and I shut it off whenever I left the office. You know, I was in the Air Force when I woke up in the middle of the night. I was always, that was just part of who I was. Same with farmers, right? Your farmer is not something that you are on office hours. It's who you are. And The other thing that I really admire about almost everyone in this community is there's not a lot of delay between decision and action, right? You decide something, you just go out and do it. So the funniest story I'll tell is so Don and I had talked about the possibility of him getting out of the race, and I told him, I said, look, my advice is you take some time. This is a big, this is probably bigger than the decision to get in the race, and I know how big that decision was. So please, when you decide it's right, let's talk, and we'll talk about how to do it. And he called like 3 hours later and said, I just left KCBD, I just walked in and told him. I was like, whoa. I told him I'm out of the race and I'm supporting you. And I was like, okay, Don, that's like the third time this week. You've totally surprised me. And I would love to talk to you more, but I think I've got to go get a statement ready now because there are going to be people asking. No, I do appreciate it. I appreciate Don, even if it wasn't supporting me, but I certainly appreciate his support.
One thing I'd point out, there is enough rural vote to do this anyway, because in the past primary election, there were 81,000 votes cast. 21,000 were Lubbock, 12,000 were Abilene, and the remaining 46,000 were through all of these rural counties. And so the vote numbers are there because people turn out to vote for their sheriff and their commissioner and those type things. And so, and if you look at the Lubbock vote right now, they publish it every day, and it's running, it's going to be bigger this year because of the presidential thing, the type race we've got going, but they're still only going to probably hit about 30,000. But Abilene, all these other places are proportionately going to be higher too, so there's plenty of votes out there, and so that's just one thing I would point out. Sorry to interrupt you. Go
No,
ahead
you
and ask
didn't
your
interrupt. If you look at this gentleman, you see a sincerity in his eye. On some of the other guys, I see a politician in their eye. And I really appreciate your background. Thank you for what you did. And I thank you right now because I think what you're going to do to our veterans is going to be a whole lot better than we've ever seen. Because we're not treating our veterans right. At all. Thank you.
Thank you for the vote.
Colonel Starr, I think to keep you on your schedule, I think we're going to have to come to an end.
All right. Well, I
on this.
appreciate you taking the time again. I appreciate your personal interest in the race and what I interpret as a commitment to our future as a nation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.